Welcome back, everybody. Today's session is going to be about texturing. I haven't done a texturing tutorial at all so far, and one of my students actually asked me to show them how to do some texturing for a cylindrical object, something like a can. So what I have here in front of me is a Coca-Cola can, and first of all we're going to focus mainly on the UVs. So if we were to compare the two, at the moment this object doesn't have proper laid out UVs. It is just the general UVs that comes up with your objects once you have laid them out, once you've modeled it out and used the revolve tool in the surfaces tab. So at the moment what I'm doing is I'm selecting all the faces, and then I'm going to apply a cylindrical map. And as you do that, you'll see most of my UVs turn into something that's more usable. It's a lot more square, and that's obviously one of the things that we need to look at. At the bottom section is obviously stretching, as you can see there. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking some of the faces at the bottom of the selection. I'm going to grow it out towards the tip of where the metal part and the actual label part meets up. So I'm having a bit of trouble here selecting. I'm just waiting for the Maya tool to respond there. So I'm going to move this UV layout out of the way, go to the modeling toolkit, make sure I activate it, select a single face, and then holding down tab allows me to ray select a row of those faces. Then I'm going to grow the selection using the shift and then full stop key on the keyboard. You can also shrink the selection by doing a shift comma click. So I'm going to grow it up to that border selection, just where the label and the metal part kind of meets up, and I'm going to take that selection and create a different type of projection. If I open up the UV editor, you can actually see that it's the bottom section of that selection. I'm going to go to the same menu at the top here where you say create UVs. I'm just having a bit of trouble finding. There we go. We're going to do a planar selection, planar mapping, and I'm going to use the y-axis as the downwards projection with keep image width height ratio turned on. Once I have that enabled, I'm going to now move the UV tile to the one full unit to the right hand side. So by typing it there at the top 1.0 and you're clicking on the right arrow, I'm moving that whole tile to the right. Then I'm selecting the whole UV stack for the middle cylindrical section, and I'm scaling it down so it fits within that square box. And then after doing that, I'm going to move it down to the bottom so that it just barely kind of crosses touching that border of my first UV block. Then I'm selecting some faces that I seem to not have added to the previous projection, and I'm going to have those faces selected. You can see there they are. And I'm going to open up the UV editor again. I'm actually going to convert the selection to faces. So a quick way to do that is by I'm having a bit of a problem there. Yes, I forgot to obviously convert that selection to faces. So a quick conversion to faces is hitting Control and then F11. That's going to take the selection, convert to faces for you. And then I'm doing a quick planar mapping. Again, from the same y-axis, I'm lining it up exactly to the center. I'm using my scale tool to bring it down. I'm zooming in, and then I'm going to try and line up these edges right on top of each other. Then I'm going to go to Edge Selection and then Control, right click, and then go to Convert Selection to Edge Loop. And then in the Polygons menu tab, there's an option for Move and Sew UVs, and that's going to collapse them to one single UV tile or one UV shell. Once I have that, I'm going to take this selection and I'm going to unfold it. So one thing that you should notice in the unfold tools, there's an option for legacy and unfold 3D. So at the moment in the option box there's nothing like that. It means that the plugin is not yet loaded. So I'm going to quickly go to the options at the top, so Windows, Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager, and I'm looking for Unfold 3D as my plugin. Once I do that, I'm going to open up the unfold tools, and now you'll see the Windows has refreshed with the two options available. So I'm going to unfold, click apply. It shrinks down the selection but it unfolds it, so I'm going to need to scale it back up to so it touches the borders of my actual UV tile. Great stuff. Now that I have laid out both of those, I need to now start thinking about actually how I'm going to assign the texture and so on. So with the current UV template laid out, if I quickly compare, I can see that my image projection on my cylinder is still not 100% square. So I need to select the UVs again, and I'm going to open up the UV editor, and I'm going to use the legacy unfold tools for me to allow it to unfold. So the first try was to just click unfold and it skewed out my UV. So I'm going to go back into the options, and this time I'm going to switch from unfold to legacy. And if you scroll down to the options, there's a method for unfolding vertical and unfolding horizontal. So I'm switched between both of those, apply both of those, and I should now have a much better UV layout. I'm just realigning it up to that UV tile, and you can see now that my square texture is much better. Right, so now we have something that's workable that we can use for the actual texturing process. The reason why we don't want stretching and compression is purely because we don't want things to stretch or compress in any way. So we always make sure you have those laid out clean. I'm going to go to the UV snapshots. I'm going to open that up, and that allows me to take the actual sampling of my UVs and save it out as a little image that I can then go and take it into Photoshop and texture. So I'm quickly creating a 1K texture. So I'm typing in 1024 by 1024 and changing my image format to PNG. I'm going to locate to my project window inside of the images. I'm going to type out the name Colocan UVs. I'm going to hit OK, and that's going to save out a template image for me to use in Photoshop. Next thing is I'm going to quickly direct to my project folder, and then inside my project folder, inside my images, I should see my UV template right there. Great stuff. So inside of Photoshop, I'm going to close my previous renders that I did for the little presentation file, and I'm going to open up my UV template. So I need to just quickly go back to images, select my UV template, and there we go. So you can see that this image has transparency. It is a little template layout. It's got some transparency there in the background. I'm going to create a brand new layer. I'm going to direct to the source images and actually bring in my UV, my template for the Coca-Cola can. Open that as a new document. I'm going to select all, hitting Control A. I'm going to go to Edit, Copy. Obviously, shortcut is Control C. I'm going to go to my template and then paste it inside there. So the quick option is Paste Special and then paste into place. Right, so I'm going to right click on this template and I'm going to hit the free transform button, which allows me to scale it down so I can fit it within my UV template. Scaling it down. At the same time, I'm holding down Alt and Shift, and that's going to allow me to constrain this to a proportionate size so it doesn't skew and stretch out. I might have to, based on the UV template, do a bit of stretching and compression just to have things lined up properly. So you can see me here making decisions on whether I want to move it to the left, to the right, and then grab there at the top handle. I'm going to move and skew it out just a bit up so that I can extend it. Right, now I'm going to take my UV template, I'm going to put it above, and that's going to allow me to see it much clearer. And then from there, I'm going to make some further adjustments to my actual Coca-Cola can label. So I'm looking at my UV template. I'm deciding on what I want to do. Should I be moving things a little bit more? So I'm going to go to my marquee selection, right click, free transform, and then scoot over a few of these pixels just to line things up. As you can see, I still have some pixels being cut off there. I see on the further right hand side they're too far in or too far out. I'm moving them inwards, and the same thing on the left hand side. I'm going to grab those, bring it in so that the actual trademark label fits within that borderline. Right, I'm going to save out my UV template now, and I'm going to save it out as JPEG in the source images folder. I'm going to call this Coca-Cola can diffuse. Just typing out the name over there. And now from here, I completely forgot to turn off my wireframe, so you don't want to save that as part of your image. I'm going to go back, save out, go back to JPEG, redirect to my folder, source images, select my diffuse image. There we go. Save it out, and there we go. I'm going to minimize Photoshop. I'm going to close all the other things. I'm going to now take my Coca-Cola can and I'm going to assign a brand new material. So if you right click and say assign new material, there should be a window that pops up called your material, assign materials and so on. I'm going to choose a blend from the list. Now I'm going to move to my attribute editor, quick menu, Control A, that allows you to quickly jump to those different options. And then from there, I'm going to make sure I bring in my label, the one that I just made in Photoshop. I'm going to drag that straight into Maya. So I'm going to open up the Hypershade. I'm going to make some space, closing some of these windows. Drag this down. Right, now I'm going to move that across, place it inside of the Hypershade work area. I'm going to drag my texture and I'm going to plug the texture image right into the diffuse slot. So I'm going to middle mouse click and drag, drop it in there, and now the texture should show up exactly the same way it's supposed to be. The only areas that will be stretching and compressing is obviously, that's just kind of distorted and not showing up the correct way, is the bottom section. Now as we know in a Coca-Cola can, that does not have any label on it, so that means we need to take that section, convert that selection to faces. So I'm quickly selecting UV tile, and I'm going to go and convert that to faces. So hitting Control, right click, and to face. I'm going to take that and I'm going to assign a brand new material to that so that it's not sharing the same material. Okay, I'm going to go to assign new material, and then from that list again I'm going to choose a blend. It doesn't really matter which material you choose, as long as you choose one that has at least some specularity. So I'm going to play with the color scheme. I'm going to slide some of the parameters for the specular properties and get something that kind of works for me based on what I think the Coca-Cola can should look like. I'll have a completely separate lesson on materials at some other point, but for today it's mainly focused on how to create the UVs and layout for the UV template. Right, with the same material I'm going to sign the two top halves of the Coca-Cola can with the same material. Right, so the label at the background is kind of selectable. So I'm going to, before we jump into putting that in a layer, I'm just going to quickly create a new light. Do a very basic light setup. So I'm going to use a simple spotlight. I'm going to assign that, and from that I'm going to move it off to the side and scale it up a bit, and I'm now going to be looking through that selected light. So we go to panels, look through selection. I'm actually looking through the light source, and I can direct it exactly where I want to point it and line it up approximately where I want it. Now, I'm going to switch the decay rate. That's how the light falls off into real life. I'm also going to turn on the lights and shadows icon in the top corner, and I'm going to type in the intensity of the light, bumping it up to about let's try 200. Let's try 2000. That's a lot better. And now that's giving me something that's workable. I'm going to change the cone angle to kind of tighten it up around the Coca-Cola can, and also play with the penumbra for the soft fall off. There we go. That's getting somewhere. I'm going to now create a quick camera. I'm going to look through that camera, zoom out a bit, line it up to where I want to have a nice clean composition, and then I'm going to click this button here at the top, resolution gate, which will show me exactly what the camera will be rendered or will be rendering out. So I'm going to get my camera positioned right, and then from there I'm going to quickly jump back to perspective. I like to scale up my icons so that they're easier to see, just for convenience's sake, but it doesn't really matter too much. Lining up, and I'm pressing T, by the way, to allow me to move the lights based on 2 pivot points. It's called transform tool. It's a pretty cool tool inside of Maya. If you press T, it actually gives you 2 little gizmo handles that you can move around. So if I move the light off and over, I'm then going to go duplicate the lights, press T, and then scoot another copy of that light to the other side and maybe pull it back so I have a little bit of a different shadow direction. Something like that. Maybe move it more. And just aiming the other control handle a little bit further back. Right, so with these lights I'm going to now disable the one so I can focus on what this light is providing me. Bump its intensity up to 10,000, and that's going to give me a little bit more intensity and brightness on the one side compared to the other side. At this point I feel like I need to add another light. I'm going to go back to the lights, and this time I'm going to make use of an area light. This one is a pretty nice light because it allows you to give you a soft fall off for the shadows dependent on the size of the light source. So I'm looking through that light source, aiming it right behind the camera, so I have some sort of a backlight coming from just behind the camera. And then I'm going to jump back to my perspective, and you can see my light source right behind that camera. I'm going to scale it up, and as you scale it up you can see that the light intensity bumps up quite a bit. From there I'm going to turn back the illuminate by default for the first spotlight so I can have the light shine again. That's a quick turn on off button if you ever wanted to use that. So I'm going to go to the color. I'm going to make one side more orange, more reddish tones, and then the other one I'm going to make it more of a bluish tone so we have some nice clean chromatic contrast, some separation in the colors. At this point I feel like we need to play with the shadows. So if I were to turn on the ray tracing shadows, those are the more advanced shadows for realistic kind of shadow drop off and so on, but they do not work with the default Maya renderer. But I've decided to maybe make some adjustments. Maybe I want to render with Maya software just so you guys can see what the Maya software looks like. I'm actually looking through the camera, so you can select the camera and then say panels, look through, select it again, and then I'm going to just quickly open up the render settings. I think I pressed there we go, and I'm going to choose my renderer as Maya software. At the moment the default that I used to render with was V-Ray. So I'm switching to Maya software, and you can see this one does not have any shadows, and the reason for that is Maya software by the default it does not render out ray tracing shadows. You have to go and turn on the option for that. So I'm switching all the shadows from ray trace to use depth map shadows. So I'm going to go and check the use depth map shadow options for each of the lights. And you can see also the other one is using the area light is also using depth map shadows. So once I render this out, you'll see that it's now properly connected. It feels like the can is on the ground, it's not floating anymore, but the shadows are very, very noisy. So if I zoom into that section, it's quite choppy and very pixelated. The reason for that is the depth map shadow method is based on a texture, and the lower the resolution of the texture, the more pixelated it becomes. So I'm actually bumping up the texture resolution for these shadows to 2048, which means it's a 2K texture. Yes, it's quite a bit, but it gives me nice, clean, crisp results. Much better. At the moment I feel like it needs some softness, so I'm going to actually increase the shadow blur. It's some of the options inside the depth map shadows area, and that tends to soften out the shadows for you. I'm now going to switch from the Maya software to using Mental Ray, so I can actually show you guys the difference between the two. It gives you a lot more control over the shadows and the sharpness and so on. Quickly going to go to the plugins manager again. So if you wanted to know how to get there, again, it's Windows Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager, and just look up Mental Ray or Maya to MR. Right, I'm switching to the Mental Ray renderer. I'm going to press render. It's going to render out, and as you can see, it's taking a lot longer because it's now considering ray tracing, and the shadows are a lot more natural. Yes, there's a bit of noise. You can always clean that up by introducing some sampling. So I'm going to jump to the actual lights. I'm going to scroll down to the ray trace section. I'm going to turn that on. By the way, any lights can only receive one type of shadow. You can't have both of them turned on. So once you turn one on, the other one turns off. So I'm using ray trace. I'm switching the shadow depth to shadow rays to 12. That allows me to take out some of the noise in the shadowed areas. Much better quality. As you can see, it's not as noisy anymore, and it drops off as it goes further away from it. I'm going to switch the other two lights to use the same type of settings. Doing another test render. Wonderful, that's already looking much better, much cleaner. And then finally I'm going to switch the area light to have ray trace shadows, and I'm going to do a quick render with that as well. Well, there you have it, guys. I think we've covered quite a bit in this tutorial. We talked about UVs, we talked about how to lay out your UV template, paint on it in Photoshop, get the template laid out, and then once everything is ready, setting up some basic lights, and there we have it, a quick test render result. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I will see you guys next